it's interesting. I want to talk about the values piece of that, because Katie, you alluded to something that I want to make sure that people get. And that's our families are constantly changing. When you and your husband, you and your spouse get married, you chose each other because the values aligned, because, everything, is working for you. And then you had kids. Those children are separate human beings. And figuring out what they value, that it's great if you can pass on your values to them, but there may be some things that are different. Victoria and I have 7 children between the two of us. Not all of our kids share the same values. So one of the things that we're looking forward to through this process is to find a time when we can get all 7 kids, and some of them are already married. One of them already has children, and get them talking about what is, we call ourselves the Pale Morch Gang, Columbus Morch Hour Gang. And what are the values that we share, so that when we're doing things together, when we're making sure that we're zeroing in on the values that we share. Because if we don't do that, if we're trying to force our values on these independent thinking human beings, that's where some of the conflict comes. And the joy for Victoria and I is we read a book called, Peace, The Anatomy of Peace. And it talks about being in the box or out of the box. And as we read the book, we sat there going, we're in the box with our kids. We have these expectations. We have this, what we think their journey is supposed to look like. And we need to get out of the box and just be okay loving them and watching them. And so my son, Alex, you know this, Katie, you might not know this, but my son was in a motorcycle accident, became a paraplegic in 2022. And he runs a business that I'm not really always okay with. But that's his choice, and he has his reasons and things for doing that business. And it's becoming more and more, it's in the cannabis industry. And so it's becoming more and more thought-based, but I grew up in the war against drugs era. So it was a little difficult for Victoria and I to make that shift. And we stopped judging. We stopped trying to tell him, take all these skills and put them into, a business that doesn't have all of these connotations. And we were just with him and his fiance for dinner on a Sunday, so this week. And we just were with them. We just showed up, Katie, and we just talked. And Connor looked at the two of us and said, this was really nice. It's nice to be friends with you. I hope we can do this more often. I'm like,
yeah, of course.
That's all I ever wanted. At the end of the day, it's all I ever wanted. It's all we ever wanted. So values matter a lot. And I appreciate all the things that you're doing here.
Thanks for sharing
it's
that.
interesting. Oh, sorry. Someone recently pointed out to me something I'd never thought of once, which is your relationship with your children after they're out of your home is much, much longer than your relationship with them when they're in your home. Right. But of course, how can you have that perspective when all you're doing is chasing them around your home, right? So it's such a gift to think of everything you just said and the opportunity there. And it's also alluding to the very first story which you told, which is, ultimately succession planning, right? And how valuable that is and what a dialogue that is. Because I think the mistake would be, succession planning is a monologue. This is what will happen when I'm no longer here. Right. And it's just absolutely not. If you want to pass on what the majority of us do, which is way more than the estate, right? So to look at it like a dialogue and the opportunity for a dialogue, we always recommend that the heads of the household come through TFM together. And then we open up the conversation for all the reasons that you're describing. You and Victoria have come to this realization because of the conversation, because of these books that you're reading. And, that's how that happens. And we see that as a really effective way to just improve that dialogue.
Love it.
Yeah. And if you're, for me, speaking for me, a good way to get me to not do something is to mandate that I do it. And so I think for values, giving your adult children the autonomy, like they already know what your values are. They lived with you for a really long time. Right. So you can say what you want, but they know what your values are. And when they get to choose their own, you can come together, with your own separate values, and there's always going to be some level of crossover. Hey, we picked honesty, you picked integrity. I learned that from you, Dad, because this happened or that happened or whatever. That's very different than sitting your son down and saying, integrity is what you must be. This is what you must do. This is how you must live your life. I don't think anyone is going to respond to that. And we find that when we bring people together, there's way more similar, like the words aren't always identical, but you see these like kind of, interweaving of similarities between like someone being adventurous and someone being creative and and it's actually like really, really, a nice exercise instead of going through and saying, this is how you have to do it. Because I just don't think people will respond to that.
You and I have spoken, Alex,